Hello and welcome to The World. I'm Yalda and I'm currently in London.
And I'm Richard Engel in Lisbon at the moment. Great to talk to you, Yalda.
Really good to see you, Richard. And, like most weeks, we are really keen, again, to talk about the situation in Gaza. Israel has launched a new offensive, and it just feels like the death toll every single day is just horrific and staggering. And of course, there has been international condemnation now from countries like the UK, France, and Canada. And last week we saw 2 diplomats shot dead in Washington. So there's a lot of tension simmering under the surface. So we're going to be dissecting that.
It is just appalling what is going on in Gaza right now. And some countries are saying enough is enough. And some Israelis are saying enough is enough, that they want to see more of a strategy. Do they really want to reoccupy the entire Gaza Strip forever? How is that possibly going to work? So we'll talk about that and Iran. So I'm still digesting all that I reported on over the course of about 3 weeks in Iran, and I'm still in touch with Iranian officials. It looks like a deal could be close, and President Trump has been making more positive sounds about that. So we're going to talk more about Iran and why I think a deal could be in the next couple of weeks.
And we'll also be discussing the airstrikes over Ukraine at the weekend, which prompted President Trump to describe Vladimir Putin as crazy. The Kremlin has responded and tried to bring the tone down again, but obviously President Trump his frustration is starting to show. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that.
So let's roll up our sleeves and get right into it.
So, Richard, obviously the war in Gaza has been going on for 20 months now, and it doesn't seem like any kind of ceasefire is in sight, although there are a lot of discussions, a lot of conversations that perhaps they're getting close. I've been speaking to contacts on both sides, and it's been described to me at the moment as wishful thinking. Hamas has said...
Wishful thinking that there'll be some sort of ceasefire.
Correct. Hamas has said has told us in the last half an hour or so that they have agreed to the ceasefire deal that Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy, President Trump's Special Envoy, has put forward to them, and that they're waiting for the Israelis to agree to it. But talking to some of the key negotiators, they say to me, not on the cards at present.
So you're still in contact with Hamas at a leadership level. And is there a leadership level of Hamas that is still sort of, I don't want to say responsible, but that the group listens to, that is still responsible for the group, I should say? Like, is there still a leadership structure intact that is credible?
As you know, they've got their political wing and political office, which is based out of Doha in Qatar. And then they've got the military arm, the military wing, which operates all of the operations out of Gaza. And just a few weeks ago, we saw an Israeli strike take out Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar, the new leader in Gaza of the military operations in the territory. But in terms of the political office that operates, I have interviewed a number of times one of their key spokespeople, one of the key officials. His name is Dr. Bassem Naim, and I did an exclusive in Doha. I did an exclusive interview with him whilst I was trailing Donald Trump during his Middle East tour to Riyadh, and then of course he went to Doha. And I sat down with Dr. Bassem Naim, and it was really quite extraordinary, actually, how much he was praising Donald Trump.
So
he was
went
saying,
to his office in Doha.
I went to his office in Doha, and, he was really praising Donald Trump and saying that the only person who can now bring peace to the people of Gaza is Donald Trump, and that he believes that Donald Trump can do it and has the will. Let's just have a listen to what he said to me. Are you willing to hand over all the hostages to bring an end to the bloodshed?
We have said it for all the mediators and for the Americans. We are ready to hand over all the prisoners immediately if we can be sure that this will lead to an end of this war, and first and foremost to allow the humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. If these two conditions are fulfilled, again, to allow aid to get into Gaza, and to reach an end, to guarantee an end of this war or genocide, yes, we are ready to hand over all the prisoners.
Are you telling the Americans this directly now?
Yes.
What are you saying to them? That these are the things that you want? And do you get a sense that you're getting a positive response from them?
We have told them this proposal or comprehensive approach, one-shot prisoner exchange, ending the war, total withdrawal of the Israeli forces, allowing all the aid to get into Gaza, and rebuilding of Gaza Strip without forceful immigration, through the mediators and directly through some persons in the U.S. administrations. Sometimes we received a positive response.
My question was, do you think that the political leadership, like Dr. Bassem Naim, mean anything anymore? Or are they too detached from reality? Because it used to be the Sinwar family show. It may still be the Sinwar family show, but when the Sinwar, the initial leader, and then his brother, who were both apparently killed, it's created a leadership vacuum. But with the level of devastation there and the daily struggles and the constant attacks on the leadership, if there's a power vacuum there, are these people in Doha filling that power vacuum, or are they irrelevant or somewhere in between? What's your assessment?
I don't think they're irrelevant. I think they are the address that the Americans are speaking to. And interestingly, he confessed in that interview that they are now in direct talks with the United States, which is obviously
I was like, he's like, directly, yes. I thought that was interesting.
Irked the Americans. And it was interesting because following that interview, an official from the National Security Council, the United States National Security Council, didn't deny but didn't confirm that they're in direct talks. So I don't think that the group in Doha are irrelevant. They are the group that, frankly, the Israelis are talking to, the Americans are talking to, the Egyptians, the Qataris. They are the address book, and they funnel the information back to the relevant parties under the tunnels in Gaza.
So who is saying that the possibility of a ceasefire is slim or none, or is it?
Well, I'm not going to
Naim, or who was not? Don't tell me your sources,
Yeah.
but you were saying who. Where are you getting this negativity about a ceasefire? And then then let's talk about what's going on in Gaza to sort of
leaders
let
in the
people
region,
understand.
because Hamas has said to me in the last few hours that they have agreed to the entire proposal put forward to them so that they can bring aid, allow for aid to get into Gaza, so that the Israelis can allow the aid to get into Gaza.
So another source, not that interview with Bassem Naim, another Hamas has said
correct.
we're ready to go.
Absolutely. But regional leaders who are at the negotiating table are saying at this point in time, it is wishful thinking. That was the exact words that I got when I spoke to them overnight.
Well, I mean, I think that's a healthy dose of realism, because look what has happened. And it's really important, I think, for people to understand what's happening in Gaza, because it's almost like taboo. You don't want to bring it up. And then if you do bring it up, you're afraid that you're going to get shouted down. So here's a few sort of facts, or a few things, a few tent poles to help understand what's happening in Gaza, right? So before October 7th, Gaza was always a bit of an open-air prison, right? It was run by Hamas. People could come and go out of Gaza only with great difficulty. You had to apply for permits that were almost never granted. A few thousand people were allowed sort of daily laborer passes to go work in Israel. And then after October 7th, obviously, there was this massive campaign to destroy Gaza, to destroy Hamas. I just spoke to someone in Gaza a couple of days ago at length, and he told me the people there are now broken, and that their spirits are broken, and that they're really just expecting death at any moment, and that there's been a psychological change. Because look at these transformations. So they had a kind of prison life that they didn't like. They didn't like Hamas. They didn't like Israel, but they had a way of existing. Then October 7th happened, changed the rules dramatically. Gaza's under attack, ferociously attacked, tens of thousands of people killed. Then there was, and this is what really did it, then there was a ceasefire. There have been a couple of attempts of ceasefire, but the latest one a few months ago seemed to be holding. And people, they started to relax a little bit. It's over. There were celebrations on the street, and people started to think, okay, the hostage process will sort of play on in the background, but the worst is over. And now it is proving to be incorrect, that the worst is coming now. And that shift really broke people. When they thought, "Ah, finally it's over. We've gone through this. We've buried the dead we're going to bury. We've gone hungry long enough. People can go back to their homes. They start to rebuild, and then it starts up again."
And not just that, Richard, but when you think about it, from the end of February, early March, there has been a blockade of aid into Gaza. So something like 80 days or so, 11 weeks, 12 weeks of no aid reaching Gaza. There have been denials, there have been condemnations, there have been, allies saying to Israel, enough. There have now been calls of you need to allow for aid to get in. That comes and goes. The only thing that is now a constant is 2.1 million people starving, being bombed, dealing with artillery fire, dealing with rockets, being killed on a daily basis. The death toll every single morning that we've been waking up over the course of the last few weeks, the death toll has been 50 dead, 60 dead, 100 dead, 150 dead. I mean, at what point does the international community say this is enough?
Well, some in the international community are saying that, and President Trump has made some grumblings, but nothing real has happened. There's been no real decisive action to stop the war, to end this campaign. In fact, the current military plan, according to the Israeli government and the IDF and different briefings that military officials give in Israel, is to take over, reconquer the Gaza Strip, reoccupy the Gaza Strip. They've taken over about a quarter of it now, retaken over. And according to Israeli officials, they plan to take over about 75% of it over the next several weeks, forcing the Palestinian population into a small patch of territory, roughly 25% of the Gaza Strip. And that once the Israelis have reoccupied Gaza, then they will stay there for an indefinite period of time as the new administrators. Does Israel really want to occupy these areas, or do they intend to expel the people and reconquer these lands for Jewish settlers and push the Palestinians, who they don't want to have to be responsible for, into Egypt, the West Bank, somewhere else?
Let's talk a little bit about the aid situation, because like I said, there's been a blockade. Israel has now, in order to silence its critics and its allies in the West, has said, fine, we're going to let some aid in. It's been described as a teaspoon by the UN Secretary General. And not just that. I mean, the idea that they are now saying to the UN and various well-respected NGOs that have been distributing aid, hang on a second, we don't want you to do this anymore. We've got a new group called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which, frankly, is an American company that Israel has brought in. But no one understands the credentials of this company, or if they have the ability to distribute the aid. And the CEO has just resigned because he said, we can't do this, factoring in the principles of distributing aid, which is neutrality, which is balance, which is why the UN is saying that we don't want to be a part of this.
It's already, the show Black Mirror, the Netflix show Black Mirror, it's already sort of sci-fi dystopia future in Gaza. I spoke with a doctor, one of these extraordinary foreign doctors who volunteered and spent her time there living in a quote-unquote safe house. And she described to me one night, she was in her safe house in southern Gaza, and a drone comes up to the window. Red lights flashing, and this drone starts to speak to her in English. So the drone flies up to this building. It's dark out. There's been attacks in the area. The drone comes up to the window, flashes its lights, and says in English, "Don't photograph me, don't photograph me." She comes to the window, and it's barking orders and can listen, and is saying, "Who are you with? Don't come to the windows. You should not be in this area." She was in her safe house, and then after she's had this communication with this drone, it sort of zips away. Like, this is happening all the time in Gaza, where there's not only drones flying overhead, they'll come down and talk to you and then zip away. People should take a look at what Gaza looks like now. It is unlivable. It is a flattened disaster wasteland full of rubble. You can't even clear the rubble away because you can't get the trucks to do it. And where are you going to put it? You're just going to dump it in the water. So you have this wasteland that is occupied with this level of security, going on, and now you're going to put in foreign contractors or foreign mercenaries. Who's going to do this job?
So basically, the feeling, Richard, is that at this point in time, there is no strategy for the day after. There is no plan here. What we're seeing is bombardment of Gaza, and Israel saying to Hamas, give us our hostages back, and Hamas saying, we'll only do it if you stop the bombardment. I mean, it's just a vicious cycle. And of course, we saw in Washington, D.C., two young diplomats who were about to get married. They were hoping to travel to Israel from the United States to meet with their families, shot dead in cold blood by someone who then screams, "Free Palestine." I mean, all of this anger simmering under the surface. And I spoke to a friend of the young diplomat who said to me, this is just the beginning. We're always on high alert across embassies and Jewish sites and museums across the globe. But this has now further sort of solidified how we feel that we are under attack as well in capital cities across the globe, including Western capitals.
And there is that huge disconnect on cause and effect and anti-Semitism. Anyone in Israel and many sort of people, members of the Jewish community, Jews, would say that attack is because of anti-Semitism. It's because anti-Semitism didn't start in Gaza, it didn't start in World War II. The Jewish people have known anti-Semitism for centuries, and that this is an example of it. And other people would say, look, you're getting a natural, violent backlash because of the government's actions, a specific government's specific actions against a specific people in a specific time. And there are those who say it's not anti-Semitism, this is a political action. And those two sides really don't seem to be not just meeting, to deny each other's existence.
Richard, I want us to just pause for a moment on Gaza, because while President Trump and Steve Witkoff haven't been able to get a deal on Gaza as yet, the one thing that is looking positive is the Iran nuclear deal. And you've been in and out of Tehran over the course of the last month or so. You've reported on some of the extraordinary things you've seen and the changes and the things that haven't changed in the country. Just tell our listeners about what it's like there.
It is cut off internationally, and that has created its own sort of unique culture. First of all, Tehran is an enormous city. We're talking 17, 18 million people. Traffic is horrendous. And it is set up with lots of distinct different neighborhoods. It used to be many different neighborhoods. But the biggest distinction, I would say, is North Tehran and southern and central Tehran. And North Tehran, which goes up into the mountains, and you can still see, Tehran is ringed by mountains, and they still have snow on them. It's an extraordinary city if you can stomach the traffic. And if you can stomach North Tehran. North Tehran, Yalda, you and I have been around the Gulf a lot. And North Tehran, which is where the elite sort of live, is as fancy as any part of Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha, with the super expensive cars and the super luxury brands. And I'm talking Rolex and Patek Philippe and massive conspicuous spending. And the reason they have all this money is, sure, there's some old money, but a lot of the old money left with the Shah. A lot of this is the new money, the new elite, because for 45 years now, Iran has had a parallel economy. It's been sanctioned, but there have been people who've been busting the sanctions, and they've been able to sell oil or gold or commodities, and that has created its own separate economy. So there's this bubble within a bubble. Imagine $300,000-$400,000 cars being driven by young people, and they're just driving back and forth to show each other their how cool they are and how rich they are, and lavish parties in hidden away country houses. And oddly enough, when I talk to people who are interested in the deal and interested in improving relations with the West, it's not just that North Tehran bubble. It's mostly the everybody else, because at least in that North Tehran bubble, they have something to lose. They've been making money off of these kind of odd schemes that the country's been forced to depend on for decades.
Oh, that's really fascinating, Richard. Let's talk about the deal now.
And I think they are going to get a deal. And I think they're going to get a deal because the Iranian people and the Iranian government both want it. And they want it for different reasons. The Iranian people want it, and because they want to get out of this box. They are suffering economically. They've had it up to here. They just want more freedom. They want to not be treated like pariahs. And the government wants it because I think it realizes that it doesn't have limitless wells of popular support. It doesn't have a lot of money. It needs some sort of exit out of this, sanctions box. And it has been weakened tremendously because of the loss of all of its armed proxies. But I think this rare coming together of where you have the people and a government who they don't necessarily embrace, the fact that they both want it and are both willing to play ball and, bring in journalists like me and say, we want to play ball. What's going on? Here's the message. Here's what here are the terms. Please tell who's ever listening. These are our terms.
You did,
we want
right?
a deal.
You did do that, Richard, because then I saw Donald Trump put out your interview on Truth Social. He just sort of screen grabbed one of the officials you interviewed and said, looks like the Iranians want it. Well, hurry up and agree to what's on the table.
So I interviewed Ali Shamkhani, he was described to me as Darth Vader. Like if you don't like the Iranian regime, you really don't like this guy. But doesn't matter if we like him or not like him. I'm there because he's a senior, top guy, can represent who he's talking, what he's talking about. And he's in the Supreme Leader's office. He's a military advisor, nuclear advisor, political advisor. And he, laid out. We sat down, and he showed up. It showed up in a, by the way, it was a relatively casual interview, and we were in his office and set up the flags. And he didn't show up with a big entourage. He just kind of walked in and sat down, and we had about 40 minutes. He was quite comfortable. Seemed quite comfortable doing the interview, although he doesn't do very many interviews. And he said, "This is what we want." He said, "We want to enrich to. We would be willing to enrich to a low level, that for civilian use." That we would not have a nuclear weapon, which is something Iran has said many times, that they want immediate lifting of all sanctions, and that they would allow in international inspectors to verify the whole process.
I've just got a comment for you, a question from one of the listeners, Richard. And it says, I hope that a deal can be accomplished with Iran and the US is correct. However, I really think Netanyahu's regime calls the shots in the Middle East as far as the US is concerned, and they're just itching to continue their pursuit of a greater Israel. Tell me I'm wrong and my vision is too narrow, from Judith via email.
Well, I can't tell you you're wrong. This Israel and the Netanyahu government have a very different view on Iran. And Netanyahu has talked about military action, how this is the perfect opportunity because Iran is weak to take a military action. If you want to do a regime change, this would be the time, right? Or if you want to do a deal, this would be the time. And is it possible that Netanyahu pursues a policy that spoils this deal? Sure, absolutely. Anything could happen. Because he doesn't have he doesn't share this goal in mind. So yeah, I think that's a very reasonable question.
I guess the question is are the Americans and Donald Trump willing to, play ball with the Israelis and, sort of let them do it or go along with it, or strike up this deal?
What's your sense? You're a good plug in there.
You know what? My sense is, and we're going to talk about predictions in a moment, so I'll expand.
Dun, dun, dun.
But I think, a Gaza deal could happen over the next few weeks, or Israel could strike Iran. I mean, I genuinely think that sort of all of those things are currently on the table and being negotiated and discussed all of the time. So I think that if the Iranians and the United States, this is this moment of not, I don't want to say hope, but cautious optimism for both sides. And clearly Donald Trump wants to be able to say that he's struck a deal somewhere. He hasn't been able to do it with the Ukraine war. He hasn't been able to do it in Gaza. So he wants this to work.
So I'll save my prediction for later, but I'm pretty optimistic that there will be an Iran deal because it's a low-hanging fruit. It's a relatively easy one. They want to do it. They've already spelled out what their terms are. They said them publicly through me and probably others. And Trump has already said, oh, well, it looks like they've basically agreed to the terms as they were relayed to me. So we're kind of there. Whether Netanyahu which is what the Iranians, by the way, are very worried about, that there will
Yeah.
be some Israeli act of sabotage or a political lobbying effort that will scupper this at the last minute. That could happen. Look, this is I don't want to say big boy politics, but this is real serious stuff. You know,
Yeah.
they're playing for keeps here.
Well, Richard, we're going to take a quick break and then come back after the break, talk a little bit about Donald Trump and his recent comments about Vladimir Putin and our predictions.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We've been talking about the situation in Gaza and, of course, Richard's recent trip to Tehran and the Iran nuclear deal. But let's shift our attention to the war in Ukraine because, we've seen an escalation in violence over the past few months where the Russians have been launching all sorts of airstrikes on Ukraine. And the Ukrainians have said, we're willing to come to the negotiating table. We saw Volodymyr Zelensky travel to Turkey and challenge Vladimir Putin and say, come here and let's sit down and do this. Obviously, Vladimir Putin turned his nose up at that. Over the weekend, we saw another massive attack on Ukraine. And Donald Trump came out and said he's crazy when describing Vladimir Putin. He just said, that I don't know what's happened to him. But
I don't know what's happened to him. He's not the same guy I used to know.
Should we listen to the
we've known
clip,
each other
though?
for so long, and he's surprising me. That was he almost took it like personally.
Yeah, let's just have a listen to that clip.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
So, Richard, he said, I don't know what's happened to Putin, but anyone who's been watching Putin for the last 25 years or so would say that actually Putin has been very much consistent with the way that he has been, and certainly the way that he has been prosecuting this conflict. Since Donald Trump made those remarks, the Kremlin put out a statement that was very polite, that was pointedly polite. They said to Donald Trump, thank you so much for all of your help in trying to bring an end to this conflict, in trying to bring us to the negotiating table with the Ukrainians, clearly trying not to antagonize Donald Trump. And clearly they can see he's frustrated by the remarks he's making. And they clearly don't want the sort of sanctions that Donald Trump has threatened them with. So they're trying to now manage the situation and perhaps also in some ways stall the peace talks, say to Donald Trump, no, we're still trying to get there with you. This is all part of the theater of war, but we're still part of the potential conversations around this. So they're trying not to antagonize him by putting out that statement to try and diffuse the situation.
Yeah, he did seem angry. So what are they going to do now? No, don't be so angry. Don't be so angry. Let's talk. Maybe we'll talk. We'll slow it down. We won't slow it down. But how can you be surprised, President Trump, that he's firing rockets at Kyiv when he says that Kyiv shouldn't exist, that it's a Nazi regime, that it should be destroyed, and that it should be wiped off the map, and it's really part of Mother Russia? And then, you're surprised he's occupied 25% of the country, including large parts of the east and the south. So then why are you surprised that he's continuing to rocket? Maybe it's just dawning on President Trump that actually Vladimir Putin is really not as interested in a peace deal as he thought he would be.
And it's probably music to Ukraine's ears because they've been saying to Donald Trump, whether it was in the Oval Office or through other statements or, through his vice president or his secretary of state, this guy doesn't want peace. He's stalling potential negotiations. He's stalling the peace talks. And through this statement, perhaps that is what Vladimir Putin is still trying to do. So we're going to continue to watch this space with Ukraine because, clearly Donald Trump is getting frustrated. Is he going to, at some point, press the button and say, okay, sanctions on Russia, enough is enough?
It's very possible. So do you want to do it? You want to do the predictions part? Is that yours? Is that yours? Are you going there? Or
my prediction, I think I alluded to it earlier, is that we may see some kind of ceasefire deal come out of Gaza over the course of the next few weeks. I think while people behind closed doors are frustrated and describing it as wishful thinking, I think that there are now serious negotiations taking place. Hamas has said they agree to the deal. They're just waiting for the Israeli side. Steve Witkoff is doing his shuttle diplomacy. The Qataris and the Egyptians are frantically working to try and bring an end to this. And perhaps Donald Trump has said to Benjamin Netanyahu, and we know that relationship is slightly fractured, that enough, you've got a very short period of time and then stop. And I think that that's why we're seeing this level of escalation. You know, in the past, Palestinians have often said that when the Israelis have sort of get a slap on the hand and told, okay, you need to stop soon, they escalate the bombardment. And that is the kind of escalation we're currently seeing. So perhaps that's what they're doing in order to come to the negotiating table and see if they've weakened Hamas enough.
So I'll go on Iran that I think in the next couple of weeks we're going to see a framework of a deal, a framework. It'll be announced as a deal, but then a little bit like the lifting of sanctions on Syria, it'll be announced and then it'll be a painful process with lawyers behind the scenes. But I assume there will be some sort of a framework agreement announced, some lifting of sanctions, getting the process moving with Iran. And that could also have an impact on Gaza, because if you know, what is Israel's main concern, threat been over the last couple of years? It was the October 7th attack. So Hamas launched this attack, and then the other attacks that have made Israel feel vulnerable have been from the Houthis or from Iran. Those have been the incoming fire at Israeli citizens. If you could make a deal with, and Hezbollah, excuse me, if you could make a deal with Iran, or President Trump can make a deal with Iran, he could then go to the Israeli people or the Israeli president, or go over Netanyahu's head, or go to Netanyahu and say, listen, you need to now slow it down. The threats against you are not the same as they used to be. There's now a deal with Iran. We're going to guarantee that they're not going to make a nuclear weapon, so you can calm down. Hamas has been destroyed. Hezbollah militarily has been defanged, and the organization is effectively destroyed. Its transit route in Syria no longer exists. Trump could have an opportunity to say, look, this is a chance for a reset, and it's a chance for Israel to de-escalate and go on to a different kind of footing if Israel and Netanyahu want to do that.
Yeah, well, we may find you back in Tehran in the near future following that story, and we'll be keeping a close eye on both the situation in Gaza and the war in Ukraine. Richard, as always, really good to see you.
Great to see you.
Please don't forget to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and send us your thoughts to our email.
Wonderful, and thanks for all those comments. Great to see you, Yalda, as always. Until we meet again.
Goodbye.